Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you guys listening to this episode because it's a little bit of a celebratory episode for myself and Dr. Kuba. This is our 41st episode. And if you would have asked us almost a year ago when we started this, if we thought we were going to make it to this episode, we probably both would have told you no. And so we're really excited to have made it this far and to have such a fantastic following. And so I wanted to use this time today to really focus a big spotlight on you guys, our audience. Y'all have been amazing. We hear from you guys often with comments. Oftentimes it's just a big thank you. And, oh, I loved your episode on so and such. It really helped me, with a decision that I had. Others of you will give suggestions or ideas for topics, which we've absolutely used. Many of you will just give a, shout out to us, to your friends as you're talking about the podcast. And so we are just loving that you guys are so involved. And we're thankful for that. When people ask Dr. Kuba and myself, why do you guys do the podcast? There's really nothing that we gain out of the podcast other than we really do enjoy getting together and talking through issues. But our main goal when we started the podcast was to be able to be a resource, to be a help to people that we don't meet and we don't know. And so we wanted to kind of spread our ability to bring peace and comfort and hopefully some helpful ideas. And from all the feedback that we're getting from you guys, that's happening. So many of you will reach out and say, I don't feel alone anymore, or I've had that exact same thought. And I'm so glad that you guys talked about that. So we feel just a huge amount of fulfillment in that you guys are being helped and supported in some small way by the podcast. So today's episode, I want to tell you about some things that are going to kind of change and shift. We are going to really start trying to bring what I call the voices of dentistry into this room with us and showcase you more on the show. We're going to start by doing that today. I've got several things that I want to kind of read off to you, and then I've got a couple of actual voice messages or voice memos from some of our followers with either comments or tips that they've had after they've listened to one of our episodes. So I'm going to actually play those for you guys today so that you can hear from other people besides just me and Dr. Kuba. And so we're kind of spreading out the microphone a bit and giving you guys a voice in this podcast because your experiences are what we want to hear about. We want to know what you're thinking, what your responses are, and we're really excited to kind of open up this channel that has always been there, but we really haven't highlighted it before. So before we get into all of the logistics of how we are going to do this, I do want to just thank you guys who are so consistent in following us and leaving reviews. I want to try to periodically just highlight you guys and give you a big shout out on this channel. So first of all, some of our best, most exciting times for Dr. Kuba and myself is when we get a review. And so unfortunately on Spotify, you guys can't leave reviews, but we've had a number of you leave reviews on Apple. And so I wanted to read off one of those today. This is from Lulu. So Lulu, thank you so much for taking the time to write a review. You guys wrote, or Lulu, you wrote, Bethany and Dr. Kuba are great. The podcast is very informative and shares great insight into the inner workings of a dental practice. Their conversations are engaging and a treat to listen to. Keep up the good work. So Lulu, thank you for taking the time to do that. I'll highlight more reviews in the days ahead and just give a shout out back to you guys on this channel. So also wanted to thank our awesome social media followers. Dr. Valadez, you are one of the best when it comes to Facebook following us. So we so appreciate you. And Dr. Cooper, you're one of our biggest fans on Instagram. So we just thank you for keeping up with us and keeping engaged on that channel. Okay, so here's what I want to kind of talk to you guys about today. I want to hear from you more, and I'm hearing from you a lot with just random comments and questions and ideas, but I actually want to hear your voice, and I want our listeners to hear your voice as well. So we are opening up a channel that I want you guys to take advantage of. You can either call a number that I'll give you here in just a minute and leave a voice message with questions that we maybe didn't answer in an episode and you want us to go back and revisit some of those. You can have tips, your own tips and suggestions. Maybe there was an area in an episode that you felt like we really overlooked and you want to give some tips. You can do that in a voice message to us. Or maybe you have some topics, ideas, suggestions that you want to make. Again, we want to hear your voice. We love the written text and we love even the face-to-face conversations that we've had with some of you. But we want to hear your voice and we want our listeners, you guys, to hear the voices of dentistry all over the nation. So you can either call a number and leave us a voice message. I will say we're going to try to limit these because we want to showcase as many people as possible. We're going to try to limit these to 2 minutes. So just kind of watch your time when you're leaving a message and try to keep it around that 2-minute mark. So the number that you can call is 214-326-4605. And I'm going to give that number one more time. It's 214-326-4605. Feel free to call this number directly and leave a voice message with your questions, comments, your own tips, your own experience. Even if you've got a short story that you want to tell us, we want to hear from you guys. And we're going to be playing more of these clips on air, and so that everybody can kind of hear from a variety of people. If you forget that phone number, it's actually on my consulting website. So my consulting website is hellobethany.com, and you'll see that phone number at the top of the website there. So if you miss that number or didn't get to write it down, my website might be a little bit easier to remember, which is hellobethany.com. The other way to get your voice to us is to actually record a voice memo and you can email it to us. So you can email me directly. So my email address is Bethany, Bethany, at hellobethany.com. And so I would love to get your voice memo either via email, or you can also text that same phone number. If you prefer to just text it over, it would be that same 326-4605 phone number. So either way, about 2 minutes in length, a voice message or a voice memo with your questions, your comments, your tips, your own personal story. We want to hear from you. I'm actually going to be playing a few of these today, and we'll be dialoguing about them together. But before we dig into the messages, the voices of dentistry that we have so far, I do want to go back and address a couple of questions that we received on our last episode. It was the holiday special episode, a quick 12-minute segment on how to pay out holidays and PTO time. So one of the follow-up questions that we had was, what about a holiday that falls on a weekend? So let me address that because I actually get that question quite a bit. The way that I view holiday pay is it is meant to be a benefit to your team. Something extra, a day that they get off that they're able to spend with their friends, spend with their family, and they're paid for that day. So when it falls on a weekend, many of you may not like my answer, but it doesn't make sense for your team to lose that benefit. It was intended to be a benefit, and it should still be a benefit. Most of the time when a holiday falls on a weekend, you are normally closed one of the days before that weekend, either a Friday or a Monday. For example, if Christmas falls on Sunday, many people will close the day after, that Monday, December 26th. If that's the case, then in your mind, that holiday is really applied towards December 26th. It's a day that's off, and your team was able to be paid for that day. So I would absolutely recommend that even if you don't close that day after Christmas, that your team still gets the 8 hours of pay that you had committed to pay to them. So if it falls on a weekend and you are still open Monday through Friday, both the week before and the week after, then your team gets this beautiful 8-hour bonus on their paycheck. And does that yield overtime? Absolutely not. It does not yield overtime, but it is an extra 8 hours that they were ultimately paid for that holiday. So please don't take away a benefit. Don't be stingy with that benefit. Allow that to still positively impact your team. And I would encourage you, just from a work-life balance scenario, to possibly choose to close the day. So one of the days, either a Monday or Friday. 4th of July is a very popular one that ends up falling on a weekend, and very few offices will close either before or after. So I would say the next 4th of July that's on a Sunday, I would just encourage you to potentially close it. Close that Monday after, so that you can have a nice long weekend and your team can also have a nice long weekend. But if you choose not to do that, I totally understand. I would still give your team that extra 8 hours of pay, and they'll be very thankful for that. The other question I had come across was, what about those employees that just simply take off too much time? They're not necessarily concerned about paid time off. They just continue to take time off. And that is also another scenario that does happen pretty frequently. So I always recommend that there is a threshold of how much time an employee can take without it being paid. So you might have your 8 PTO days, and your, Miss Sally takes off a lot, is taking off, 12, 14, 15 days. And you're thinking, what's my recourse here? She's used up her PTO, and now she's just fine taking off the days without pay. At some point, that becomes a problem for your practice and for your team, because you've got somebody that's just chronically missing. So I would recommend instilling a threshold. Of course, this needs to be in your office policy manual, very clearly stated, and you need to have a maximum amount of unpaid time that they can take off, except for extenuating circumstances like the death of an immediate family member or the birth of a child. So I would recommend, especially because the dental field tends to attract a lot of females, plenty of single moms, I would recommend giving at least 7 days of unpaid time, depending upon your PTO policy. If you only have 4 days of PTO, then I would recommend doing more than 7 days. When we think about a mom, especially a single mom with children, and the onus of that responsibility is on her when her child is sick, it's likely going to be very hard for her to only take a total of 11 days off. That's pretty tight. So in that particular case, if you only have 4 PTO days, I would probably go more for 10 or 14 unpaid days off. The length of time is completely up to you. If you've got a good, generous 8 PTO days, you could easily get by with another 7 days of PTO, of unpaid time off, meaning that they've got about 15 days throughout the year that they're able to be away from the practice. Now, what's the recourse when somebody goes past that time? It's essentially disciplinary action. So once they've gone past that time, again, if it was for any kind of normal reason, we wouldn't even approach this subject. But if you've got somebody that seems to kind of willy-nilly take off time, then it gives you the opportunity to sit down with that person and go, hey, Sally, you're at 17 days. Your maximum amount of time has already surpassed. You weren't supposed to take any more than 7 unpaid days. You're now on your 9th unpaid day. We've got to sit down and have a conversation about this. What's going on? What's requiring you to be gone all this time? This is a problem for us. We really need you to fix this. And then you set expectations. We really need to see within this next month that you don't take a day off. We've got to see some progress here. And you set very clear expectations, or it could be, hey, by the end of the year, we need to know that you're only going to have one more day that's extended to you. That's all the grace we have left to give. And if you can't do that, then maybe this is best for us to part ways. And again, I know that feels foreign because we're all super dependent upon our team right now, and we don't have many people to replace them. But sometimes it's easier to work on a slimmer staff and you know that they're there than to have somebody that you've planned for to be there and then they're never there. So again, look at your office policy manual. Make sure you make a tweak and a change to that. I would recommend a maximum amount of unpaid time off. And I would say, if you yield on one side or if you err on one side, I would err on the side of too much unpaid time off because you don't want to put yourself in the position where you are having to have conversations with multiple staff members because you put that window just far too tight and too many people can't abide by that. So just be very careful with the policy, but it's nice to have a maximum threshold for that one person that really is taking advantage of the system. So I wanted to kind of hit both of those, and I wanted to then play one of our first comments here. This is a doctor who has some experience with associates, and she had a few tips for us that I thought were really good. We just finished up our associate series, so there's 3 episodes in a row on associates. It's a very big category, a very popular category right now. And this doctor, her name's Dr. Cooper, she has some tips for us with associates. She actually left us 2 great tips. I'm going to play her second tip because it is definitely an area that we did not touch on in our 3 episodes on associates, and I thought this would be helpful for you guys. So our first voice of dentistry on this podcast is going to be Dr. Cooper, and let's see what she has to say.
A second tip that I would have for hiring an associate would be to set the expectations with cost. Whether that be additional supplies, materials, a different use of a lab, to just kind of know as the owner where you want to draw those boundaries. I like to make people comfortable. I like to give them what they say they need to perform their job. But I do think there's a fine line with that because sometimes I think it creates a space where people continuously bring you their wish list, that they have to have these items to operate. And I think that if you're going to be bearing all the cost of that as the owner, I would have a boundary. If you want to give an allowance to say, $300, can go towards the new burrs that you feel more comfortable doing your restorations with, or if this is a lab that you're going to use and it's not one that I have a relationship with, then let's maybe make a decision on the lab bill. And then that will sometimes maybe kind of give you a filler as to whether or not that really matters to the doctor or if they're just bringing you their wish list. Because I've been in situations where I've been too generous. I've bought the material that they needed and they didn't even use it. But then it was a material that I didn't have any desire for, which is why I didn't have it in the first place, but I've already spent the money on it. And I think that the more that you talk about those situations before they come up, then that may just go ahead and make it a little bit easier so that you don't find yourself in a position to where you're getting bitter because you're overspending and you feel taken advantage of because someone wants more and more and more, and you're the one that's bearing the cost for all of it.
So I loved this tip from Dr. Cooper. It's one of the areas that we did not address in our episodes, but so critical because we really do have to set the expectation from the get-go. Are we the ones, covering all of the expenses? There are some associate setups where they have to contribute to some of the expenses. And if you've got that in place, then that may kind of take care of itself. But most contracts are set up to where the office or the practice owner is covering the cost of those supplies or expenses. So for you guys who are either having associates, looking at associates, it's really important to get them into the office, allow them to take a really good look at all of your supplies, your equipment, what all you use on a regular basis, and allow them to really take inventory of how much they may potentially want or need to be able to do the dentistry that they want to do in your practice. Because if we can address that from the beginning and we, like Dr. Cooper said, have a really clear understanding of how much is being contributed by the practice and then how much the doctor himself or herself would need to contribute. So they then can decide, okay, I've got, $300 of equipment or supply allowance that the doctor's given me. So I'm going to use that towards my most desired things or the things that I know I can't live without. And then if I choose to continue to spend beyond that, it's on me. It's not on the practice. So I think having a very clear budget is very important. Then if they want to go past that budget, which many may, they may be very particular about their equipment or about their supplies. And if they are, that burden rests on them, not on the practice. So I think this was a really, really good tip. Have the conversation before it becomes a problem. If you've already got an associate in place that is asking for things, maybe this is a new associateship, I think it's absolutely appropriate before you start purchasing things to go ahead and have this same conversation. So even if it wasn't done before the associate was contracted with your practice, it's never too late to have the conversation. Or let's say you're in that kind of difficult position right now where you've got an associate that continues to come back and ask for more. It's okay to kind of draw a line in the sand and go, you know what, let's have a conversation because I realize there's a lot of additional expenses that I wasn't really expecting. Let's kind of work together to set up a budget. This is how much I've spent so far. In all honesty, I really can't spend any more than another $100. So the rest will be on you. I, do have another $100 that I can contribute. So use that where you may, but ultimately the rest is going to be on you. So you can kind of put a fork in things and just make sure that you guys are kind of heading onto a different path so that you don't continue to be in that difficult position. Also, once you've set the budget, it's really important for you to let the person who orders your supplies know so that they know the budget and they are tracking how much they have specifically ordered for your associate. So those would be some really good tips. Thank you, Dr. Cooper, for sharing those. All right, so I am super excited to hear from our second voice of dentistry. This is actually related to our episode on Know Thy Practice. So this was probably 5 or 6 episodes ago, and we talked about the importance of really understanding the ins and outs of your practice. And funny enough, when I heard this, when I listened back to the episode on Know Thy Practice, I thought about a client of mine who I think does a fantastic job on just being super connected to all aspects of the practice. And he was gracious enough to give us a few of his tips. So I will play these now. This is from Dr. Valadez, and he is going to give us a few tips on how to better know thy practice.
Hi, I've got a couple of tips connected to your episode on Know Thy Practice dealing with end-of-day audits. The first is to create a petty cash log. In our office, we log the patient's name, team member making the transaction, payments received, and change given. I use an Excel file, and it keeps a running balance that makes it easy to check the petty cash till at day's end, not only to make sure it balances, but to let you know if you need to restock the petty cash for the next day. The second is another part of my end-of-day audit. I check the ledgers and claims of each patient and audit the deposit slip from my software to make sure it balances. This helps decrease drama in so many ways. I make sure adjustments or write-offs made are appropriate and look for any trends in write-offs that may signal an issue with our billing procedures or insurance verification. I also review narratives on the claim to verify they are clinically relevant, increasing chances of payment. This is huge, as dealing with claim denials are so annoying and time-consuming. It also serves as a daily audit to make sure the team is collecting or pre-collecting appropriately. Lastly, your team knowing you are auditing will greatly decrease your chances of falling victim to embezzlement. I'm usually the last to leave my office, so I do this at the end of each day, but it can easily be done the next morning. It seems time-consuming, but it now only takes me about 15 minutes to complete, and the information you glean from doing this is invaluable. I hope these tips are helpful. Best wishes in managing the dental drama in your office.
So this is wonderful tips from Dr. Valadez, because this is really getting you intimately connected with the financial aspect of your practice. I know that in our episode, Know Thy Practice, we started off talking about being clinically connected with the practice in ways that you aren't typically, like sterilization and where things are kept. But we did kind of start to touch lightly on some of the financial aspects. And this little tip from Dr. Valadez takes us kind of into the deep dive of that and gives you more specifics on how to do that. Petty cash is often one of the undermanaged aspects in a practice. We kind of throw the money in there and have a general idea that we hope everything's okay in there. But I love Dr. Valadez's tip of keeping just on an Excel spreadsheet a log that is connected to the team member that touched that box and what transaction happened. Did they take from that box to pay for a team lunch because Dr. Valadez forgot his credit card and they need to log that? Or did they put into the petty cash? Somebody paid in cash and now they're adding to that. And that would need to have the team member's name, the patient's name, and the amount that was contributed to petty cash. I would say that it doesn't have to be an Excel spreadsheet. It can be a log that's kept directly in the petty cash box. As odd as it sounds, I would make sure that the log is only completed in ink and that it is, again, the expectation that it is logged in by everybody, and it should be balanced regularly. It doesn't necessarily have to be daily, but at least once per week, the petty cash does need to be balanced to ensure that what the log is representing is actually what's represented in the petty cash box. I did have a client that several $100s went missing from petty cash. She had a patient that paid that particular week in cash, and later that week, the petty cash was unaccounted for. We couldn't locate it, couldn't track it, never did find it. And so the assumption obviously becomes what Dr. Valadez referred to, which is some sort of embezzlement that occurred, which then talk about opening up a can of worms. That's a really big task to try to figure out. And it ends up with you casting a lot of blame that may not end up being the person's fault. So it's just important to have a good tracking mechanism to balance it at least weekly, if not more. If you receive a lot of cash payments, I would balance it daily. The other tip that he gave was his end-of-day procedures, and I loved his take on this. I am at his practice when there are times that he's doing this. And like he said, it's a pretty quick process. It sounds intense. As you listen to him, he's reviewing the claims to check the narratives and to see if there's anything else he needs to add clinically. He's running an audit report. He's looking at all of the adjustments that were made. And you think, wow, that is just a lot of work. It's really not. Most software programs make it very easy for you to pull a very quick adjustment report. In fact, you can have one of your team members at the front print that adjustment report for you, or an audit report, and then you're simply looking through that. You want to look at the adjustments, both the credits and the debits that are happening. When you see a bunch of credits on an audit report or on an adjustment report, you want to make sure that those adjustments are connected to something legitimate. Okay, so if we look and there was a $300 credit adjustment on John Jones, and we go to quickly look at his ledger and we don't see a description or a reason for that adjustment, we want to get clarity from our team member. And again, to Dr. Valadez's point, it's good for them to know that you're watching and that you're watching very closely. So when we go and ask a team member about that $300 adjustment, if they're fumbling for how to answer you on that, then it shows that there may be something that wasn't done correctly, or again, we go back to that scary term embezzlement and wonder if there was potentially a cash payment made by John Jones. And instead of documenting the cash payment, your sweet little stealer at the front took that $300 and pocketed it and did an adjustment on the account instead. If there is a number of debit adjustments, meaning we added to the balance on somebody's ledger, those always raise a red flag for me, not because of embezzlement necessarily, but because that it shows that we are making mistakes that potentially shouldn't be there. So when would there be a debit transaction or something, a charge adjustment is, I believe, what Dentrix calls it. It would mean we've made a mistake on an account. We either inappropriately placed somebody else's payment on an account where it was not supposed to go, and now we need to debit that adjustment off. That's a pretty big mistake, and if that's happening regularly, then we need to talk to our team members about that. Or could it be that we are filing out our claims to insurance incorrectly? Meaning maybe we've got it set up where we are billing out to insurance our contracted rate rather than our full fee schedule. Why does that matter? Well, it matters if in the rare, extremely rare case that insurance actually goes up on a particular code. For example, if we've billed out our contracted code and since that contract, they've actually increased and all of a sudden we are receiving a payment for more than we actually billed to the insurance company, then we are creating a charge adjustment to even out that account. And again, that would be helpful for you to see that because we need to change our billing to insurance to bill the full fee, our full office fee to insurance instead of the contracted fee, which would eliminate the debit adjustments in that particular scenario. So doing a quick look at your adjustment report or an audit trail and then just clicking on the accounts that have adjustments is a really important safety routine that you should do. It is much quicker than it sounds. It might take you longer initially, but once you get in the swing of it, it's going to be something quick and easy. Like Dr. Valadez said, probably 15, maybe 20 minutes, and you'll be out the door. Whether you choose to do that at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, that's completely up to you. But I do recommend that it's done on a regular basis. Again, it's not the most fun part of the day, but it is such a great way to really know thy practice. So thank you so much for Dr. Valadez. Thank you for putting those tips together. I hope that all of our listeners will take some of that and apply it, and hopefully all of that and apply it. All right, let's listen to another voice of dentistry. I'm super excited to showcase a voice memo that we received from Dr. Patel in regards to building a really happy work environment. And this, to me, really connected to our episode on the importance of mental health in the workplace. And so I want to hear Dr. Patel's tips on creating that happy workplace.
Dentists by nature are very goal-oriented and highly focused individuals, and sometimes it can be hard to notice that so much time has passed and we haven't given ourselves time to take a break. So my first piece of advice is to make it a priority to take scheduled breaks. Like anything in life, if it's a priority to you, you will put the time in to make it happen. Even if you need just a few hours or half a day, schedule it. I recommend scheduling all your planned time off for the whole year. Waiting until you need a break to take a break can often cause a lot of stress on you and your staff. This allows them to know when to schedule patients with you and allows them to plan their days off as well. This also gives you something to look forward to, especially during more busy and stressful times of the year. My second piece of advice is to remind yourself why you need to take a break. Taking short but frequent mental breaks is important because how we feel about ourselves, our environment, and the people we interact with seeps into every aspect of our lives, whether that's in your home life or your work life. The people who care for you and work for you deserve the best version of you. You can't give them or your patients the best version of yourself if you're constantly running on a half-charged battery. This also brings up another point, which is do not feel guilty when you need to take a break. You're not letting anyone down. In fact, the only person you are letting down is yourself if you don't take time to recharge. I also encourage you to talk to your staff to take PTO if you have incorporated that into your practice model. Oftentimes, it can be better to spread that PTO out versus taking it all at one time. Again, it goes back to frequency of breaks, not just the length of time that person decides to take off. Finally, I would recommend scheduling time for you and your office manager to sit down with each staff member individually, maybe once every 6 months or so, to have lunch. The key here is to not talk about work. Talk about life, how their families are doing, new and fun things they have been up to, their dreams, their goals. You'll be surprised how far this goes for so many people, including your staff. It creates an environment of, I care about you as a person, not just as an employee. I still believe in this challenging employee market, people want to feel valued. Expressing value outside of an employee's pay rate is an important component of building a team that has your back. I hope you find these tips useful, or at least the discussion has sparked some new ideas that you can incorporate into your own practices. Thank you.
So I loved these tips from Dr. Patel because they are so practical, first and foremost, and they focus on something that I think is, again, often overlooked. To Dr. Patel's point, we often don't realize we need a break until it finally hits us. And then in that moment, we need a break immediately. So I think the idea of scheduling out a full year of breaks, what are those long weekends going to be? Can you mark off 3, 4, 5 4-day weekends throughout the year that is really only taking off 2 business days, but it's giving you this break that you can look forward to, whether that's just a staycation where you're vegging the whole weekend, or whether it gives you the time to take a little short road trip somewhere. But scheduling several of these throughout the year minimizes the impact to your practice and also gives your team the opportunity to take a nice long weekend break. Many practices still function under the Friday off model, and if that's the case, then scheduling a Monday off would be the only impact to these 4-day weekends. So I think that's a great tip, going ahead, getting them throughout the year, getting them planned and fixed in place. One of the other things is it is very common that once we have those fixed breaks in place, that our temptation is to pull back from those. Oh, shoot, production last month was a little bit low. You know what? I'll just cancel my plans for next month. Let's plan on working those 2 days. And I would caution you against that because, number one, your team has likely looked forward to that break. They've been anticipating it just as much as you have. But second of all, there is something about knowing that you had a break scheduled and it was taken away that is almost doubly impacting to you in a negative way. So once you place those things on the calendar, whether it's a few long weekends, whether it's 2 weeks that the office is closed, whatever version of time off you've put onto the schedule, make sure that that is held as sacred time. If you feel like you're going to be the type of person to cancel that long weekend or cancel the break time and have everybody work instead, schedule yourself a non-refundable vacation so that you are forced to actually take time to mentally recharge. There's a chance that if you do this often enough throughout the year, you'll be walking into that vacation or into that long weekend not needing it so desperately as you once did. So it's okay if you're approaching that vacation and you're feeling like, oh, I don't even know if I really need this. That's fine. That means you've been taking care of yourself well, which is what I would want for you. And there's a chance that you'll be walking into that vacation dragging yourself into it, that you're desperate for that. And if that's the case, you may want to schedule more frequent vacations or time away from the practice. So again, protect yourself. I think that's a really good point from Dr. Patel. I like also that he mentioned the team, because having this scheduled time with the team is so critical. And again, it's non-work related. It is more personal. Just let me check in on you. How are you doing? What's up with your family and what's going on? So I like that he mentioned you and your manager. If you have a manager or a leader in place, this can remove any kind of awkwardness or things getting too deep and too personal if you have a third party at that conversation. So if you've got a manager or a leader or even a spouse that's willing to go with you to these events, these lunches or dinners, take them with you. It'll keep it from being awkward at spots, and it will help to kind of spread out the impact of that conversation to other people as well. Again, really great suggestions. It's a good reminder, especially as many of you are in the heat of a crazy summer. It's an important reminder to take time for yourself and not be ashamed to take time for yourself, but also to carve out time for your team and to make sure that they're taking time for themselves as well. Your team needs a break just like you need a break. So make sure that that's possible in your practice. I have to just once again thank all of the people who participated today in the podcast. I loved hearing your voices. I loved hearing your thoughts and suggestions. I'm excited to get more of these. So please, 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 once this episode ends, send me your recordings, and I want to be able to incorporate those in places in our podcast in the future. And continue to follow us and leave reviews. I want to be able to give you a shout out as much as I can. I want to shine the spotlight on you guys because you guys are what's keeping us going at this point. We love being able to be a resource and to be a help for you. And we want your voices to be heard more in this podcast. So I'm excited to hear from you. I wish you all the very best. I hope it's a fantastic week with very low drama.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.